Hello and welcome back to the latest season of the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Peter Houston.
And I'm Esther Thorpe.
And in today's interview, we're back with the celebrities. And this was like fun one again. I was speaking to Charlotte Owen, Editor-in-Chief of Bustle, which is for women in their 20s and 30s that want to live a big life. She's also EVP for a collection of other BDG brands, including the super cool nylon and the parenting brand Scary Mummy. I mean, early in the interview, we get into this idea that you cannot be everything to everyone. And her own rejection of the idea that publishers should be chasing eyeballs at any cost.
I love the fact in this interview that you asked her about this mushy middle. I know we talk about this quite a bit, is this idea that you're not quite niche enough to be essential, but you're not quite big enough to compete at scale. I think that was Digino said that about Courts back in 2020, I think. But she kind of came back with that whole era of eyeballs and traffic being over as like a real gift to editors because they can really hone in on this specific point of view. You actually said later on it's like a niche lens for a mass market.
Well, that came to me from someone that was doing a magazine. I say this in the interview. A magazine for the parents of boys. And she used to get furious when people said, oh, that's a niche. It's like, well, no, it's half the population. It's the way we're looking at it that's the niche part. I mean, for Charlotte, everything's about positioning and identifying your own people, the people that you really, really want to talk to. Even if it's stories that other people are telling, and it could be younger women looking for adventures, it could be mothers in the trenches, or it could be influencers at Coachella. She tells this great story about doing a short run print for people at Coachella. I
mean, they're leaning into print more, aren't they? Like she wasn't dismissing it at all.
With nylon, yeah. But the point with that was, and I thought it was such a great way of looking at that. So I don't know how many they publish of these things or print, but even if it's 1,000, say, they're handing them out to these people who are fundamentally influencers at Coachella, who have all got millions of people following them. So you might do a short run print, but it's getting out to millions and millions of people, which I just thought was a great way of looking at print.
Okay, so a question I've got for you after talking to Charlotte is, why is Bustle thriving when a lot of similar sites targeted at 20 to 30-year-old women, like Refinery 29, have really, really struggled basically since the mid-2010s. They've had 40% revenue growth for Bustle itself. They've had 25% across the whole group. What are they doing that other people aren't?
I think, so she said this thing that it's about relationships. She talked about access, access to the talent that they talk, red carpet type names. But also to the brands, that they've got relationship with brands and they can have conversations around the brands that gets them into the idea of creating. She used the word bespoke. I don't like that word. It makes me think of furniture. But, campaigns that are actually specifically tailored to the brands rather than just selling space like we all used to do. So that idea of access, I think, it can be leveraged. It's not just about who do you get to interview. It's who do you get to support you? Who do you get to spend money with you? So yeah, no, that was great. I mean, the last 10 minutes of the interview, we talked about her own podcast for Bustle. I keep saying One Night Stand. It's not One Night Stand. It's One Night Stand.
Which has been shortlisted for the Publisher Podcast Awards this year.
Excellent. It's just really, really, really good. It's very clever, but it's also really well made. And then from a media geek point of view, the revenue side of it, where they do these affiliate tie-ins with book sales and stuff, it's just clever. It's well done. Really well done.
Talking about growing businesses, a news story that caught my eye this week, The Ankler, we've spoken to Janice Min before on the podcast, they've left Substack, and they were kind of one of the early, really big publishers. And I think the figures I saw from Press Gazette was that they had 150,000 paid subscribers and about 10 million a year in annual revenue. So that's quite a big blow for Substack to have lost them. So Janice Min and Richard Rushfield, they wrote this letter kind of outlining the rationale for leaving. Their premise was basically like they've got 15 newsletters, they've got podcasts, video, live events. So they were like, well, it kind of makes more sense for them to move away from what is basically a newsletter platform to their own website. And Janice said, if the first wave of newsletters in media was about supporting independent creators, the next wave is about building durable businesses. Which I did wonder if is that a little bit of a signal that there's other people kind of looking at going as well.
Well, definitely though. I think this is such a sensible move from them. It's control, right? It's one destination. You can be more flexible in your subscription offers. You could actually design your newsletters better.
But then you also have to design it. You like all the designers are left to you as well as.
Well, I think if you're doing £10 million in revenue,
you can probably afford a couple of designs.
Yeah. But the big thing is Substack's taking 10%, and that's a lot of money. Any super successful newsletter, like Ankler, is going to be looking elsewhere because they want to keep more money. They want to keep more of their reader revenue.
But also, they've not cited this. Substack has also got quite problematic over the last few years. So Casey Newton's platform left Substack in 2024 because they suddenly introduced a load of far-right voices and allowed Nazis to monetize their publications.
Yeah, they didn't introduce them. They just didn't stop them.
Which is a whole platform responsibility debate in itself. The thing that absolutely tipped me over the edge a couple of weeks ago was finding out Andrew Tate had joined them and was one of their top 10 earners.
Yeah.
I'm not financially supporting anybody on Substack. At some point, people need to look at sort of think, where are their principles here?
Well, it comes down to money, right? It's rapacious capitalism, which is kind of disappointing because that's not how certainly not how Substack talked at the beginning. They talked about not being the advertising platform, about surfacing great writing, supporting writers to do good work. And then all of a sudden it's, the outrage engine kicks into gear and it's all the head cases that are making the most money on the platform because the outrage is driving subscriptions. There's a brilliant post by a guy called David Karp on his former Substack newsletter called The Future Now and Then. And the title of this post is, so Substack, I'm out. And it's really interesting. It was after Substack announced an integration deal with prediction markets, Polymarket, I think it was. So he says that, this is such a great quote, the future of Substack is going to tilt toward writers with large audiences running completely unregulated pump and dump schemes. And he's talking about these betting markets where you can bet on when Trump's going to bomb someone or, there's just the most heinous things you can bet on. And Substack's actually made it possible for writers to integrate that into their newsletters. Which is just bullshit. So that was what he left. And he even says, the Nazis, maybe I should have left when the Nazis came, but it's the prediction markets that's pushing me out. It's really weird. It's that law of unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
We've got an open platform. We'll support everyone. Freedom of speech and Wrangler jeans, blah, blah.
A lot of social media platforms had to wrangle with this decades ago. And a lot of them came to the conclusion, if you promote hate speech and misogyny and violence, we will ban you or we will demonetize you. Yeah,
until Facebook or Meta, whatever the bastard they're called, stopped all the moderators and, allowed you to say whatever the hell you want.
It's swung in the last 5 years again, isn't it, already?
I mean, I've still got a newsletter on Substack. I haven't done anything with it for ages. But I'm done. I'm moving it off. I'm taking my 500 subscribers elsewhere. I think they've got problems. I think, forget the Nazis and Andrew dipshit Tate and the prediction market nonsense. 10% off the top of a subscription revenue is too much for anyone that's got real success.
I'm surprised they're not more flexible about that because Mill Media, the Manchester Mill and that, they left in 2024 again because of the revenue split. And I'm surprised they didn't almost have a sort of deal if you get to that point and you pick up the phone, they're like, yeah, okay, we'll reduce that revenue split to keep you. Because if the publisher leaves, they lose all of that money.
Yeah, but they seem, they actually seem pretty rigid and flexible.
There's still a lot of publishers that are trialling Substack. So Reach, when Reach joined it last year, they said that they were basically leveraging the network effect, because that is one of the things that Substack has got that none of the other rivals do, is this sort of interconnected network of recommendations. And they've managed to get that brand name, that brand recognition.
Yeah.
Substacker. It's all
people talking about having a Substack.
Yeah, not a newsletter. So I think it's going to take a lot to turn the tide, but there's definitely more people thinking of leaving. My final 2 pence on Substack. I've seen quite a bit recently about how they're pushing a lot of people towards their app rather than subscribing via email. It's just that word of warning that you do not own an audience unless you have their email address. You know, a follower on Substack or a follower on LinkedIn, unless you have their email address, they are not your audience.
And that was their big starting point, right? Own your own audience, move
Yeah.
it. I don't know. Anyway, back to Charlotte, much more positive. I started by asking Charlotte to basically just tell me, because I'm clearly not the target market for Bustle, just to tell me what is Bustle and what is BDG.
So BDG as a whole, we think of as a kind of modern media company that sits at the intersection of publishing and talent and then experiential. I first joined Bustle in 2018 to launch the UK arm. And at that point, the brand was 5 years old. Our CEO, Brian Goldberg, founded it in 2013. And since I joined in 2018, we've acquired a kind of suite of other brands, really, that allow us to, I think, the goal is really to have this sort of full suite of brands that can speak to lots of different audience segments all within the same umbrella. And Bustle itself is obviously the first brand in the portfolio, and it's a mass women's media brand. In some ways, I think sometimes those brands are harder to explain because I think that they're a little bit of everything to everyone.
Yeah.
But Bustle's mission is really for sort of women in their 20s and 30s. We talk about our reader wanting to live a big life, wanting to have lots of adventures and have fun and kind of get out there. And she's not like a luxury fashion consumer in the way that like a lot of brands are for like fashion audiences. That doesn't mean she doesn't like to buy nice things. She definitely does. But she's not as bi-coastal as some of like a lot of other media brands are. You know, she is everywhere throughout the US and the UK. And it's very much meant to be a sort of inclusive, fun space. And you know, social has always been a big part of our strategy with Bustle. We have like a very big audience on Instagram of like 9.2 million followers. And our Instagram account really came of age in the sort of like meme and social virality era. And I think there was a moment where we were trying to pivot more towards being a sort of traditional media brand before realizing actually we should just lean in. We're funny on the internet. That's like a great thing to be, and women love to laugh. And I think that really anchors our publishing strategy as a whole, really, is that we're always trying to find the sort of like funny quirk in the story, the little like angle, the little joyful moment. We often send our reporters to cover red carpets, and of course, they're capturing the celebrities when they're posing, but it's more about those in-between moments. It's more about, like, we had a video go viral last month of Jacob Elordi giving his gum to his mom, and we overlaid it with some funny music, and it's just, and like Adrian Brody commented on it after his moment at the Oscars, similarly being like relatable. And so I think that's really, you know, we are relatable. We're trying to show up on the internet in a kind of like funny and informative way. And you know, I think growing up in the UK and like growing up with British media, you are used to a very playful type of media that I don't think is as common in America. And so I always try to bring that playful energy as well.
Do you think that idea of being everything to everyone is the problem for a lot, particularly in women's media? You know, I remember someone talking about Mashable and they talked about the mushy middle. Do you think that's something that you're trying to fight against all the time?
Definitely. I mean, you have to resist that. You can't be everything to everyone. And I think in many ways, the internet of the late 2010s kind of pushed us all towards trying to do that because of the search strategy and like scale. Exactly. A lot of media brands went after like eyeballs at any cost kind of thing. And I think that era being over is such a gift to editors because you can really like hone in on a point of view and really be specific. And in the time that I've been at BDG, I started out working on one brand and I now work across all of our lifestyle and parenting brands. And actually, it's really clarifying to have the whole suite of brands because we'll be sat in a meeting and someone will come up with something and I'll be like, no, that's an Elite Daily story, or no, that's a Scary Mommy story. And it forces you to funnel rather than being like, oh, I know that's a really good story, but it's not quite right for our brand. And so it forces you to be more selective. But I do agree. Yeah, I think it was a sort of weird era of just everyone trying to be everything. And it's so nice now we don't have to, that's not the expectation or need or goal or.
So you brought up the portfolio, which I guess you got 6 or 7 brands in there if you include Bustle. Is that hard? I mean, you've answered part of that actually, in the idea that you've got places to put things. But is it still hard as the person that's in charge to keep your arms around all those different brands?
I think there's a difference between being an editor-in-chief on, like I am on Bustle, and my role as EVP. The other brands have their editor-in-chiefs, and the way I support them is different to how I run Bustle. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the last few years is knowing when you're not the right person to answer that question, and knowing when you've hired someone who can do it better than you and you should let them go and let them just do it. And so in my role as EVP, it's less me being a kind of creative visionary across all the brands and more me coming up with a business infrastructure that allows all these brands to thrive within the BDG internal economy. And doing that means getting out the way as much as getting in the way. And I think that a lot with Nylon. So Nylon is a huge sort of Gen Z brand that's really for cool girls in New York and LA and anywhere in between. And it's really about nightlife and it's about music, and we have a monthly It Girl series that we photograph like the culture's biggest It Girl of the moment. And one pivot actually that we found really effective in the last year, we used to shoot these as kind of individual mini fashion stories, and then we turn them into mini covers, and the performance has exploded because these audiences demographics love to see their young Miko or Lil Sims or whoever sort of given a cover moment. But with these talent, I often don't know who the hell they are, like when they come up in the meeting, and it's kind of an incredible arc because no, because when it first comes up with our talent bookers and with the editor-in-chief, I'll be like, no clue, but I guarantee you by the time the cover comes out 2 or 3 months later, I know who they are. And that's their superpower, the team on Nylon and our talent bookers, is that they see that coming before the mass audience feels it. And so I know in those scenarios that it's my job to just smile and go, good job, everyone, and off you go. And I think the same with the parenting brands. I'm not a parent. I don't have children. I have a lot of friends that have children, and I observe from the outside about what I see as the challenges or the interesting parts of their existence, but you can't be everything to everyone either. And so a big part of my job is getting out of the way.
When you say cover with Nylon, what do you mean by that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so a digital cover in this age it sort of involves the sort of logo treatment. Still means something. Covers really mean something to talent. They mean something to audiences. We are increasingly putting those in print as well. So for Nylon, all of our traditional covers now live as a broadsheet that's distributed at our events. So we have Coachella coming up where we have a massive Nylon house event, and we have this oversized broadsheet that we'll be distributing with our cover, and the talent is scheduled to come to the event, which is very exciting. They are showing up in print more often, but it's these digital moments with the logo, and I think that to the reader, what it conveys is that we're saying this person is the moment. Not every magazine, when they put someone on the cover, is an endorsement. We know if Time puts Putin on the cover, they're not sort of being what, but for a Nylon or for a Bustle, there is more of an element of us saying take notice, this person's having a moment.
I think it's interesting what you're doing in print. There was such a buzz when you went back into print, I guess, 23, 24? I don't know if you know the guys at Ra and Ollie in London. They did the distribution, or they did some of the distribution, and he was just buzzing on it. He said that, almost as soon as they put it out, they were getting calls for extra copies and stuff. It was very cool.
I love to hear
very
that.
Cool.
People love print. Print is great. I mean, I'm a huge reader, books mainly, obviously, but there's something about engaging with paper that does something to my nervous system that makes it just and I think there's nothing better for inspiration, for sort of discovery, and our print strategy across the portfolio is something that I think we would love to go further into in 2026 and 2027.
Right at the head of this, you talked about experiential. Now you've said about taking print copies to Coachella. That I think is amazing. Again, it's blending those two different things together. That idea that, yeah, we're at Coachella and it's going to be all over Instagram and we're going to write stories that'll be online. But you know what? If you're at Coachella, here's something that'll make you feel really special. I love that. I just love the way that all meshes together.
Totally. And I think our CEO, Brian Goldberg, is a genius in many ways, but he really saw that with these experiential events, there's also an opportunity to curate a very specific audience. And we also now have our Nylon membership program that is really targeted towards the scene, really, of like cool kids. And many of them have lots of followers and have a very large audience of their own. And so yes, you're only distributing the print copy to people at the event, but those people all have enormous audiences of their own. And so are tastemakers, they're culture definers, they are people who others look up and listen to. So it's a small distribution, but it's actually a very focused and strategic one. And I think that's what advertisers buy into as well, is that it's not just like 500 people at a Sainsbury's in Birmingham where I grew up. It's like these people in Coachella who are, you know, posting about it to their millions of followers and amplifying even further.
Yeah, I think the idea of amplification is huge. I love the idea that your audience is influencers. That's just mind-bending. That's something else.
Yeah, that is Nylon's superpower for sure.
Well, that brings me kind of to my next thing, is that idea that different formats work better for different brands.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've talked about nylon, but, you know, Scary Mummies is a fascinating one. The idea that mums are on their phones, but probably not as much as they used to be. So do podcasts work better for them, or do newsletters work better for them?
With Scary Mummy is a lot of social video, and I think that they really look to our editors to capture that, oh my fucking God, yes, relatable feeling in 3 seconds in a video clip, which is really kind of what we're trying to do. It's that sort of like...
I love that. I love that as a tagline for a magazine. Oh my fucking God.
But it is that sort of relatable feeling that like moms need, of like, they're in the trenches. They are like, you know, don't have much time, and that sense that like a video can just grab them with that like you're not alone feeling. Like it's really about generating that feeling with our social content on Scary Mummy. And so Scary Mummy's always been a very social focused brand, and then the website is really where you can go deeper. But I think we've always been about that sort of like no shame, no judgment reality of parenting. And so I think their audience really connects there. Newsletters is really big for the Zoe Report, our brand TZR, which was founded by Rachel Zoe, who is back on board as our sort of editor at large, which is very exciting. That audience is really used to receiving the recommendations and sort of like, I guess, the authority of that brand through the newsletter format. Like the open rate is around 50% consistently. It's just a very dedicated, specific demographic of, you know, wealthy women who like love to shop, and they like the specific point of view of that brand. Again, it's not trying to be everything to everyone. The aesthetic isn't, you know, for everyone, and that's a great thing. But so the people who read it love it. So social video, and then newsletters, and then Nylon's obviously very experiential focused. Bustle's a little bit of everything. I'd say Bustle is where we still are really getting like eyeballs on the longer reads, and the more like, I always talk to our team about the, you know, typically with media, you've talked about like news and features or like columns or, you know, sidebars for those of us back in the print days. But I think about Bustle as really being about ideas. And so I'm always talking to this team about like idea story, like what's the idea? What's the idea we're offering about this TV show, the original thing? And that can show up as an Instagram gallery post or a 2,000 word think piece. And so I think those different formats are important, but it really is about bespoke kind of treatments. And, you know, Inverse, which is our brand, which is really for like entertainment super fans, so they're like Comic-Con nerds, that kind of vibe. So it sounds bad coming out of my mouth, but trust, they, you know, their audience is that, they love it. And, you know, we're thinking about ways that we can show up there with like the dedicated fan base of doing just like mixers in bars where like fans can get together. And, you know, that doesn't need to be uber fancy and sophisticated. It should just feel real and relatable and moments of community. So we're always thinking about that. And then I can't say too much about this yet, but we are also excited about Fatherly and sort of developing that brand on social and making that a destination for young dads to kind of learn more about parenting in conjunction with celebrity as well.
What you're really talking about is niche media, but niche media for a mass market. I always remember having a conversation with someone who makes a magazine for the parents of boys, and her getting so frustrated at being called niche media because it's half the population, right? And it's a little bit like that. It's like there's so many people ultimately are going to be mothers or fathers or whatever it is. But it's still having that niche lens to look through. And I think that's an interesting sort of twist on the scale aspect of it.
It's absolutely important. I remember when we were sort of coming away from this era of, you know, loads of traffic and thousands of stories a month, that one of the slides that I used to present to the team who were like nervous to let go of that was this idea of our readers' media diet. And I used to have all the things that I thought they consumed on there. And it might be that we think they listen to the Daily in the morning. We think they go to Eater or, one of those places for their restaurant recommendations. And the idea I was trying to get across to the team is that, like, we can all be for a demographic, but we don't need to be all of these things to the reader. Like, we don't need to be giving them recipe recommendations and, I don't know, like talking to them about therapy and advising them about perimenopause and like what they're like, giving them doctor's advice. But we can absolutely be in that demographic, but we can be a very specific function of it, and we should expect our readers to have a broad media diet that we want to be a part of. We're not the entire menu though, and that is an adjustment, I think, from 10 years ago.
Yeah. So you're obviously doing something right, because your revenue growth is pretty spectacular if the numbers I'm seeing are right. 40% for Bustle and 25% for the group. Go on, how are you doing that?
Well, I think it's really about diversifying what we can offer. I think when you think about advertising revenue, it's easy to think like, either print pages or boxes on websites, but it's really not that anymore. Like we say, it's the experiential, it's the sort of like bespoke print products, it's our relationships with talent, and the way that we're able to leverage those for brands as well. And so I think it's really been really strategic about broadening our offering in that way. And then our revenue team does an incredible job of having sort of really consistent long-term relationships with the clients and with advertisers. And I think that's your kind of dream as an editor, because it's people showing up over and over who understand the value of the brand and who understand like what you can do that others can't. And I think that's also something that they've been really successful and effective at. But I would say it's really just about like broadening the menu of options and strengthening our own offering as well. Like, we're constantly trying to improve that. I think back to when I first started in media, there was such a different culture of like, I started at Condé Nast in 2011, and I don't want to say there was no culture of transformation, but there wasn't a sense that we all needed to be evolving every 6 months or 12 months, and that that the world was going to be changing, and so we had to update. It was like we had a model, we were very good at it, and we kept doing the same thing over and over. And yes, we tried to improve the stories, and the product was always exceptional, but that culture of business innovation just wasn't in the air. It wasn't in the air in the industry. And now I think one thing that has just changed all the time, and I'm glad I don't hear it from the team so much anymore, but there was definitely a moment where people would be like, oh, are we pivoting? And it's like, you just don't get to stand still anymore. Like, that era is like gone. So, and it's not even really pivoting, it's just evolving. And so I think that's a big shift too.
Yeah, the whole concept of pivoting. I mean, the first time I really remember it was with the video. The pivot to video.
Yeah.
And it just became this like, oh my God, here we go again.
Exactly.
And it's not that, is it? It's this kind of spectrum of constant iteration that's going on.
And constant tweaks. Like, we're constantly tweaking. And that's something that I push really hard with the team is I'm like, try and fail. It doesn't matter. Like, we just don't do it again, and we evolve and we do something different next time. And I think that's a big part of it, is that it's not these big pivots that take like a year to execute. It's just like, we try something next month, and then, if it's not working, we'll try something else.
Yeah, definitely. Is most of your revenue advertising or brand promotion, sponsorship?
A lot of advertising, a lot of affiliate, and then experiential, and all the other bits and pieces like that.
Subscriptions? Do you do anything around subscriptions or memberships?
With the Nylon membership club, the members don't have to pay anything, but it is like a sort of revenue, obviously, source. But no, not subscriptions.
So it's more about knowing who's looking at nylon rather than taking their hard-earned cash.
Yes, exactly.
You did a piece in Press Gazette, I guess, a while back. One of the things you talked about was the importance of access. And I love when people talk about that. In a weird way, it's such an insider thing. People who don't work in media don't understand necessarily. They value it, but they don't actually get how hard it is to actually keep that access to whoever it is, whether you're talking to celebrities, whether you're talking to scientists, whether it doesn't matter who you're talking to. Can you talk a little bit more about why you think that's so important? Because I love that as a framing for what the value of what you do is.
Everyone has a phone, everyone has a computer, anyone can tell you what the best lipstick is in their opinion, but not everyone has access to Bobbi Brown or the person who designed the lipstick in the first place and has tried 50 this year already at their desk and has 10 years experience of trying them. And I think we are always trying to build authority for our readers and access in areas that they can't go. We want to take them into rooms they can't go. We want to share the experience that maybe they don't have. And access is just like the central part of that. It's the way that I think you prove your like value proposition and you are able to generate something that isn't already on the internet. Like I think about that a lot with every story we put out is, does this need to exist? And I think that that's like the existential question for so many media brands is that like, are you putting stuff out there that really needs to exist, that a dedicated like group of people want to come to and want to return to? And I think access and exclusivity is one of the surest fire ways that you can like guarantee that you're putting something meaningful out there, something that doesn't already exist. And relationships are the cornerstone of that. And to your point that it doesn't matter if you're like dealing with scientists or celebrities or like if you're reporting about what's happening in Whitehall, like you need those relationships. Like that is a key part of what we do. And it's a hard part, you know, it takes real work. And I think that's a part that I didn't really fully understand until I worked in media, just like how much that would be, how important that would be and how hard it can be at times, you know, to really generate that access. And so whenever we're hiring or thinking about editors on the team, people who are comfortable being uncomfortable and walking into rooms and, you know, building that access and authority is really important.
It's a really fine line as well, right? Because they desperately want you to tell their story, but they want you to tell it their way, whereas you want to tell it for a way that makes sense to your audience.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's not easy, and you know the reader always comes first, right? That you have to always have that in the back of your mind. And I think relationships are like how you are able to thread that needle if it's ever difficult, is, you know, that trust and that sort of collaboration and people understanding that you will be a good partner, but you also, your reader comes first as well.
All right, one night stand, or one night stand, I should say. I absolutely love it, and I just want to talk about how you do it and why you do it, actually. So you've been doing it since the beginning, 2025, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Roundabout. Where did that idea come from?
It was a collaboration with me and one of our editors, Samantha Leach. We both love reading and love thinking and talking about books. And, you know, I think in the last few years, it's not exactly a new thing that I was thinking a lot about how we can turn more of our interviews into video interviews, because that seems to be how everyone wants to consume everything. And so we were thinking about a format that would feel distinct and feel singular. And, you know, if speaking completely candidly, I think I was feeling more pressure as an editor-in-chief to be visible and to be on camera for my brand, which is not something that I particularly wanted to do, if I'm being honest. Like I'm not a theatre kid. I was not like any of those. That was not my bag at all. I would quite happily be in an office just like working away invisibly, but I recognized that it was something important. And so when I was thinking about something that I could do, that books just felt safe to me, as something that I knew I could be comfortable talking about on camera, because I'm very comfortable talking about my work. I'm comfortable talking about things that I know about, but I knew I couldn't be one of those editors that was like posting my outfits. I just can't. Like, I wouldn't know how to do that, and I wouldn't be good at it. And I have such respect for the people who are and can do it. And then we're also just thinking about what's distinct, what's something that we don't know about celebrities that we would like to know more about. And, you know, we're in this moment where people are talking about books more, and celebrities are often developing books. They're turning them into TV shows or movies. And I think also this sort of rise of more video interviews means that they're constantly playing dumb games at junkets, and we participate. We have them play dumb games with us too. And so there's no judgment there, but I think we wanted to try and create something that felt really like meaty and meaningful, and a place where you could have a really honest conversation, and an honest conversation that they felt safe within, and that you could get them to say something they haven't said before. That was the main thing. As I was just like, how do we get these people to say something they haven't said? How do we ask them something different? And so it kind of arose as a constellation between all of those different things of as wanting to experiment with a video series for Bustle, me knowing I needed to do something, like host something for the brand, and books feeling very comfy, and as knowing that celebrities were we soft-sussed it, and publicists were interested and into the idea. And yeah, we just kind of run with it since there, and it's been such a joy to work on. And it's just fun to talk about books. So I love it.
So the venue is actually quite important. Where do you record that?
We record it at 11 Howard, which is a hotel in downtown New York. My friend Jasper, who's a brilliant woman, she does a lot of their comms and strategy around their sort of branding. She has a sort of mental health initiative with the actress Brittany Snow, and we'd done events there before, and I told her that I was thinking about doing this, and she's like, I think you could do it in the Blonde, which is this beautiful bar, kind of honestly a bit of a nightclub. And it's always interesting, the celebrities that walk in and go, isn't this a nightclub? And you're like, oh, someone's been here before. But it's this very sort of intimate, cozy space, and we're so grateful for their partnership, because they let us film there, and it creates this sort of cozy atmosphere, really, where you're able to like talk and feel connected and like snug while you're gossiping about books.
That really plays a part, because so many video podcasts is just, you know, two mics and go down a sofa and whatever, and you can tell it's like there's something going on there. It's a nice space.
Yeah,
the podcast itself is great, but if I look at it from a business model point of view, the fact that you've got affiliate links in there to 4 books pretty much every episode, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
That's a clever way to play that.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of joined up in a really nice way. And I was really heartened, actually. Our Daniel Radcliffe episode went live a few weeks ago, and quite a few clips went really viral, particularly one about How to Hide an Empire, this book that he recommended. And the top comment on the YouTube and Instagram was like, I've just bought this book. And it was liked by thousands of people. And I was like, yes, people are really like buying books and reading the books. That's the dream, right? Yeah. So it is a great joined up way of getting people to hopefully sort of like engage and shop through. I think, you know, it's also just a really effective like marketing model for Bustle as well. You know, these episodes regularly break news. They regularly generate pickup in other publications, and it's hard to do that these days, because if a celebrity's on a press cycle, they're probably doing 30 interviews across different things. And so to actually get them to say something they haven't said anywhere else is, you know, it's priceless, really. And so we're always really keen to push those episodes out far and wide and get the sort of exclusive snippet that shows that, hopefully to the point that access and is what makes us unique to our reader, prove to our reader that there's a reason this thing exists, and it's because you won't have heard what they're saying elsewhere. What's
the process in terms of choosing who you speak to? Is it because they're already on a press run, or is it people you want to talk to? Or
I mean, it's typically we go through their calendar of like who's going to be out promoting projects. It's definitely easier to get talent to do something when they're in promotion mode. They might be camera ready for the day. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously the first question we ask is, are they a reader? Like, you know, do they actually really love reading? Because it's sort of, you know, it wouldn't be fun for anyone if the answer to that question was no. I'm very anti-book snobbery. You should just read the things you enjoy. No judgment goes into that. And so I love the fact that we've had such a spectrum of book recommendations, from the sort of self-help readers to the sort of like Victorian literature fans to the sort of modern rom-coms. And so it's really just a question of like, who do we think is a reader and has like interesting things to say about those books? And, you know, we always want to make sure that we're casting in a diverse way, you know, and that we are getting lots of different perspectives and lots of different types of books. And I would say that's truly been one of the biggest joys of the last year, is I read all the books before the interviews. And
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, I do. I try, like, occasionally if they send them 3 days before, typically I would say on average I've read one of the books in each foursome before, and then I'll definitely get through two. There's occasions I don't get through the fourth if I've only had a few days, but it's such a joy. There's so many books that I've read in the last year that I wouldn't have picked up on my own. There's no way I would have thought, oh, that's something I'm going to read. And it's just a reminder, I guess, all the time that we should be thinking outside of our own personal preference.
Definitely. The other thing I love is the fact that your schedule is it doesn't appear to be rigid.
No.
You know, sometimes there's an episode every 4 days, and sometimes it's 2 weeks. And you know, as a podcaster, I kind of love the fact that you're saying, "I'll screw the schedule. We'll put it out when it's ready." Is that deliberate, or is that because it's just their schedule are driving it?
It's a lot of their schedule. We're obviously having to fit around. And we do try to go live on Tuesdays at 8 a.m. and sort of have some rhythm to that. But I'm not afraid of having off weeks. Like, it doesn't, you know, there's so much content in the world that I don't think anyone needs to be putting out anything that's imperfect. And so I'd rather just get it right and get it out with the right person at the right time. I just think with stuff like that, like, you can end up putting out stuff that doesn't need to exist. And it's just like, let's just put out stuff we feel good about and assume the audience will find it, which it seems to be happening, which is great.
I mean, the other thing I noticed was that some of your episodes are 35, 40 minutes long and some are over an hour. And again, you know, there's this old saying, there's no such thing as a podcast that's too long, just one that's too boring. And I love the idea that you just say, okay, 35 minutes, done, an hour, yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah.
I think that kind of flexibility is, I mean, it's honest, right? It's
Exactly.
an honesty about that.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, when you're working with talent and you're interviewing them, some of them just want to go deep. They're adapting this book. They have so many thoughts and feelings about it. And some of them, they don't want to go as deep, and you sort of have to respond. And that's part of the like alchemy of interviewing, right? Isn't it? It's sort of like understanding when to push, when to step back, when to move things on. And so I think we're always trying to make those judgment calls.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you the most unfair question ever. Who's your favourite so far?
Ooh, good question. I think one of the episodes we had that really, really went viral last year and that I loved was with Celine Song, the director of Materialists. And she recommended such a great selection of books, and they all kind of informed the way she thought about Materialists. And so when the movie came out and people had a lot of opinions about whether the movie was like broke boy propaganda or stuff because the main character ends up with the less wealthy guy, everything she'd said in that interview offered so much insight into the way she was thinking about the movie. And I just loved the books that she'd chosen. And we spoke for like over an hour, and I loved that conversation. I really enjoyed Daniel Radcliffe a few weeks ago. His books really were so interesting. And I was nervous before the interview because some talent, when they have had a very big famous project, don't like to talk about it. Some are very happy to talk about it. Actually, I think an interview clip with Lisa Kudrow went viral this weekend where she was like, I've never been one of those people that's like, I don't want to talk about Friends. And the first question I ask every guest is, have you always been a big reader? And Daniel just goes, I think Harry Potter got me into reading. And I was like, great, the elephant's in the room. It's done. I don't have to feel out whether he's going to be comfortable talking about this. So I really enjoyed that as well. But I mean, and I had Jessie Buckley on at the end of last year when Hamnet was coming out. She was just incredible.
Did her Oscar success drive a spike in traffic to that interview?
I think it's definitely driven spikes on social for sure. I think more the like clips of her going that we had in particular. She recommended a book by Jean Rhys called Good Morning Midnight, and whenever she won an award during the award season, I would see that video spike in views, that particular clip, which is just the most amazing thing, because you think it would be, you know, the fact that that's what people were like looking to learn more about her is my guess, or like the algorithms were serving more about her. The fact that we were able to serve something so unexpected, I loved.
The takeaway for this for me, and I'm going to try and desperately work it into the headline, is that idea of asking the question, should this exist?
Yeah, we should, because the answer to a lot of the time is no. And, you know, none of us want to say that out loud, but you sometimes have to be okay with that being the answer.
Thank you so much to Charlotte for joining us on the podcast. If you want the key learnings from this in writing, head over to voices.media. Make sure you're signed up for our newsletter and you'll get it straight in your inbox every Tuesday.
And our publisher summits are coming up in July. Early bird rates are ending soon at the end of this month. All the awards are closed, but the shortlist are coming out. The podcast shortlist is actually out now at publisherpodcasts.com. And the newsletter award shortlist is coming next week at publishernewsletters.com. Details on all our events and more at voices.media/events.
And next week we have a podcast coming out, a documentary about zero-click content.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, I've been working on this for a couple of months.
Are we doomed?
No, we're not actually. I think there's a lot of stuff people need to pay attention to, but the general theme of it is you always should have been paying attention to that stuff anyway.
And next week's guest is Liz Alessi, Vice President and General Manager of Axios Local. So she joined Axios at the start of the year to build and scale its local journalism into a sustainable national platform, which, if you've been paying attention, is something that's pretty tricky to crack in the digital age. So we spoke about the pros and cons of their approach of a few reporters in each area, how they've adapted across different markets, and their partnership with OpenAI.
Until then, keep up with all things Media Voices by following us on LinkedIn, subscribing to the publisher newsletter over on voices.media. Bye.
Bye.
Well, this one.